The old mailbox stood at the end of a gravel path, half hidden by a wild rose bush that nobody had trimmed in years. Every morning for 10 years, a woman walked that path in whatever weather God sent her. Drenched in rain, shivering in ice, burning in the summer heat, she continued. She walked it the same way every time, unhurried, shoulders straight, one hand tucked into her cardigan pocket. With just one change in pace, she walked quickly when approaching the mailbox. But after opening it, when she found nothing of what her heart had hoped for, her eyes would fill with tears. She would close it slowly and then with small, heavy steps. Like a patient leaving a doctor's office with bad news, she would walk back to the house to start Eleanor's breakfast. This is the story of what she was waiting for, and what waiting cost her, and what it gave her in the end. The morning Robert left for Vietnam did not begin like every other morning on Sycamore Road. Maggie and Robert couldn't sleep the whole night, both kept in tears until dawn. Maggie said, "Darling, my heart is breaking. How will I live without you? What if something bad happens?" Robert said, "I will be back soon, darling." Both were up before the sun. Coffee made, table set, cornbread in the oven. She was 24 years old, and she loved Robert the way you love something you cannot imagine never having had, quietly, completely, and with a fear underneath that she kept entirely to herself. Robert appeared in the kitchen doorway in his army uniform. He sat down, wrapped both hands around his coffee mug, but took only 2 sips. Departure grief had stolen his hunger. In a sad tone he said, "I will miss the breakfast made by your hands." He reached into his breast pocket and pressed their wedding photograph flat against his heart. "I will keep this picture with me," he told her. "When I miss you, I will look at this." At the bus depot, Maggie held Robert's face in both hands and with tears in her eyes studied him constantly. The shape of his forehead, the small scar above his eyebrow, the way his eyes turned amber in morning light. "Come home soon, darling," she whispered. With a broken voice he said, "Take care of Mama. She won't make it easy, but take care of her." Maggie nodded. "I will." He kissed her once, brief and firm, then crossed the platform to Eleanor. His mother was crying, her old hands shaking. She held his cheeks and kept kissing him, and said through tears and a breaking voice, "You are my only son. Now who will care for me?" He looked at Maggie one last time, smiled through tears, then boarded the bus. Maggie raised her hand and waved until there was nothing left to wave at. 6 months of letters arrived every 2 weeks without fail. Robert wrote about the heat, the red mud, the men beside him, especially a quiet man from Oregon named Daniel Pruitt, who lent out paperback westerns when he was done with them. He always ended the same way, "Kiss Mama for me. She won't let you, but try anyway." Every evening, Maggie read each letter aloud to Eleanor in the sitting room. Eleanor always asked her to read it twice. The letter that should have arrived in November did not come. Maggie checked the mailbox twice a day and told herself it was the distance. On Christmas morning, she sat alone at the kitchen table. Lost in memories and tears, with the biscuit tin of letters open before her. Eleanor came downstairs, sat across from her, and placed her hands silently over Maggie's. It was the first time she ever had. It was a cold January morning in 1966. Maggie saw them through the kitchen window before they knocked 2 Army officers in dress uniforms walking up the gravel path. She stood frozen at the sink, her heart pounding. When the knock came, she could barely dry her shaking hands on her apron. With trembling legs, she walked to the door and opened it. "Mrs. Collins?" "Yes," she said. "We are sorry. Your husband, Robert Collins, has been listed as missing in action. We did our best but could not find him." Hearing this, she froze. Maggie stood in the open doorway with the cold January air coming in around her and could not find a single word. Tears flowed like rain down her face. The knock had brought Eleanor to the doorway too, and when Maggie heard the fall behind her, she turned quickly. Eleanor had collapsed to the floor unconscious. Maggie and Eleanor were consumed by grief. Both lost their appetite and sleep. Life seemed to stop completely. Eleanor called her son's name day and night, and Maggie kept her tears for every quiet moment alone. Life had stopped, but the hope from the mailbox had not. It still needed checking because there was hope in one small corner of her heart that missing was not dead, and Maggie held that difference like a lifeline. After this, she and Eleanor developed a careful routine. Polite, functional, not yet warm. From a cold and distant relationship, they moved around each other in the house like two people sharing a small boat, always aware of the other's weight, always careful not to tip it. After some months, Maggie was shocked to notice Eleanor forgetting small things: her Bible, her breakfast, whether she had already taken her morning pill. She covered for her quietly and said nothing. In early 1968, Eleanor got lost walking to church 3 blocks from home. A neighbor brought her back. Eleanor insisted she had simply taken a longer route. Her voice was steady, her eyes were not. Maggie took her to see Dr. Harmon the following Tuesday. The drive home was completely silent. That evening, Maggie made Eleanor's favorite chicken and dumplings, and set it before her without a word about the appointment, the diagnosis, or the word the doctor had used carefully, like something fragile. Eleanor ate quietly. Then she looked up and said, "Robert loves this." Present tense. Not loved, loves. Maggie looked at her plate and said softly through tears, "I know he does." Maggie was now carrying a double burden. The grief of losing her husband was already unbearable, but now his mother's condition had begun. And she was frightened about how to care for her while keeping the kitchen running and holding down her job. When she realized Eleanor's condition worsened whenever Robert was mentioned, she stopped talking about him around her entirely. The years between 1968 and 1973 were the ones Maggie never talked about afterward. She worked at the school during the day and cared for Eleanor through the night. She bathed her, managed her medications, and read to her every evening from whatever book Eleanor pointed to, even when Eleanor could no longer follow the story and simply wanted the sound of a familiar voice. The hardest moments were not the loud ones. They were the quiet ones. Eleanor looking up from her chair with complete blankness in her eyes and saying, "I don't know who you are, but please don't leave me." And Maggie sitting down beside her, taking her hand and saying through tears and a broken voice, "I'm not going anywhere, Eleanor." Every morning without fail, she still walked to the mailbox, still opened it, still closed it slowly with tears. She wiped before going back inside. Some hopes you simply cannot put down. In the summer of 1973, Maggie's younger sister Ruth drove up from Nashville. Over coffee at the kitchen table, Ruth said what she had been saving for years. "Okay, Maggie, Robert has been gone 7 years. This woman was never even kind to you. When does it become enough?" Maggie was quiet for a long moment. She looked out the window toward the mailbox. Then she said, "He asked me to." "That's enough." Ruth left the next morning sad and helpless. That night, Maggie read Robert's last letter one more time. Eleanor looked straight at Maggie and said, "Who are you? Get out of my house." Maggie went to the bedroom, opened the closet, pressed her face into Robert's old work jacket, still hanging there, breathed in what was left of him, and cried for half an hour. Then she went back to Eleanor and took her hand. "It's me. You're safe. I'm here. 10 years since Robert left." Okay. Maggie faced many problems. Her husband's grief, her job, loans, and Eleanor's medical bills. But her morning routine was unchanged. Coffee, check on Eleanor, walk to the mailbox. The mailbox was the only hope she was living for, along with her responsibility toward Robert's mother. The same gravel path, the same wild rose bush, the same hands opening the same old latch. But one morning, something was different. Inside the mailbox sat a worn envelope, edges soft from years of handling. Her heart started racing and hope started building. A Vietnam postmark dated 1966, a name she had never seen before in the return address corner. Daniel Pruitt. Nashville, Tennessee. Maggie's legs gave way beneath her. She sat down on the gravel path right there and did not care. Daniel Pruitt had been beside Robert in Vietnam. He wrote carefully, like a man who had rehearsed every word for years, because he had. Robert had pressed the letter into Daniel's hands the night before their last mission. "If I don't make it," Robert had said, "find my wife. Margaret Collins, Millbrook, Kentucky. Promise me." Daniel had been wounded the following morning. He spent years recovering the letter folded inside his breast pocket the entire time, always meaning to send it, never finding the courage. "Until now. I am sorry it took me so long," he wrote. He deserved better than that. Robert's letter was written on a single folded page, the handwriting slightly unsteady, pressed hard into the paper like a man making sure his words stayed put. "My darling Maggie, if you are reading this, then Daniel kept his promise, and I did not keep mine. I am sorry. I meant to come home. Mama is not easy. I know that more than anyone. She never learned how to show what she feels, not even to me, but she feels it. Everything, I promise you, she does. I don't know what these coming days hold, but I know you, and knowing you, I am not afraid for her. You are the best thing that ever chose me, Maggie. Take care of yourself now. You have earned it. All my love across whatever distance, Robert." Maggie sat on the porch steps for a long time after reading it. She read it twice, then a third time. Eyes burst with happiness. She kissed the page and pressed it against her eyes. Robert was alive, and the hope of his return had risen like sunrise after 10 years of darkness. She folded the letter carefully along its original creases and placed it in the biscuit tin, on top of all the others, and tied the blue ribbon around it one final time. She carried the tin to Eleanor's room. Eleanor was sitting by the window in the afternoon light, one of her clearer days. She looked up when Maggie entered and almost smiled. Maggie sat beside her and took both her hands. "There is good news. I had a letter from Robert today," she said quietly. "What?" Eleanor asked. She wanted to hear it again. "It's Robert's letter." Maggie said, "He is alive." Full of wrinkles transformed in that moment, tears of happiness began flowing, and a smile that had been missing for many years slowly returned. Eleanor hugged Maggie and kissed her cheeks. After some time, when both had recovered, Eleanor asked, "Is he coming home?" Maggie held her hands tighter. "He never really left," she said. "He was here the whole time." Eleanor's eyes filled slowly. She gripped Maggie's hands with whatever strength she had left. "It's a good boy," she whispered. "He was," Maggie said softly. "He really was. She stayed. Of course she stayed." A week later, another letter arrived. Key, Robert was coming home in 10 days. Key, this news was not just news, it was new life. For his wife, and especially for his mother. Eleanor began recovering from her illness with remarkable speed. Even her memory started returning. Both women began preparing for his welcome, with a joy they had almost forgotten how to feel. When Robert finally walked through the door, Eleanor held his hands with tears in her eyes and said, "I have to thank you and Maggie. She never left me alone. She is not my daughter-in-law anymore. She is my daughter."